And now it is about that time. We're ready to hear from our first team. We have Skyview Academy's Educating Empathy with Allison Joseph, Madison McCoy, and Dawson Drew. Good luck.
Hi, my name is Allison Joseph, and I'm the team lead.
My name is Madison McCoy, and I'm the mentor liaison.
And my name is Dawson Drew, and I'm the videographer.
And our project, Educating Empathy, is focused on educating students to help themselves and others in the face of mental illness. And this is our video.
Well, I try to do what I think is best for that person, but sometimes I know it can be a little hard to help and you don't really know how to. It really does sit with me when my friends tell me I'm depressed, I have anxiety, and I don't always know how to help and I don't always know what to say, so it gets kind of difficult because I don't want to say the wrong thing. Definitely, I feel like that could be super helpful to kids with depression, anxiety, or just like helping them, I guess, because I know that it's really hard to help a friend in need, and if we had like a guide, it would be really, really nice.
As someone who suffers from depression and anxiety, it was very obvious that there was no mental health education going on in schools. We decided to make a curriculum targeted for middle schoolers to explain mental illnesses such as depression and anxiety. We made an activities-based curriculum to help students understand mental health.
In our first lesson, we did activities with the students to get to know them and in order for them to get to know us. And knowing the difficulty in opening up about mental illness, we primarily focused on creating relationships. At the end of the lesson, we asked students to write down questions they had based on these words.
We then catered our curriculum to answer those questions.
Our next 3 lessons focused on activities to educate students about depression, anxiety, and the resources they had available. One of the things we greatly focused on was to help them differentiate between depression and sadness, as well as anxiety and stress.
We did a lesson every week for 4 weeks. We educated students on the medical and physical aspect of depression and anxiety to show the students that what these people are facing are truly real and affect the brain, just like any other physical illness. Our hope for this was to try and start to break the stigma that comes with the word mental illness and show that it's okay to seek help.
After each lesson, we reviewed what we taught the students, and they were able to identify symptoms and coping mechanisms for mental illnesses.
How do you comfort somebody when they're having a panic attack?
You give them comforting words.
You can tell them to take deep breaths and calm them down.
That it might be harder for people with depression to like work through things than a person without depression, or
We wanted to make lessons that were helpful and impactful, so we wanted to keep the idea of peers teaching peers. We instilled the help of link leaders at our school so we could continue educating students even after we leave.
After our last lesson, we gave an anonymous survey. That way we could take the students' feedback to make our curriculum better. One of the students said in the anonymous feedback that we helped them realize what they were going through and that it helped them get better.
We hope that our curriculum will continue to help students at Skyview and continue to educate empathy.
Now, according to the Mental Health Association in New York State, 14 years old is the average age that people with a mental illness start to show symptoms. Now, this age group is when middle schoolers are starting to transition into high school. However, these students aren't receiving the proper education or help that they need about mental health. When the 3 of us were in 8th grade, we first came into contact with mental illness and we had no idea what to do. But it wasn't until our siblings reached 8th grade that we noticed they were facing the same trials we had at their age. We realized that nothing was improving, so we decided to make a change. We designed an original curriculum catered towards middle school students about mental health. After speaking to our middle school principal, Mrs. Worley, we learned what issues were specifically facing the students at Skyview Academy. We even asked the students to write down any questions they had about mental health and catered our curriculum to answer those questions. We received approval from a licensed counselor to make sure that the information we were providing was accurate and relevant.
We decided to keep our curriculum activities-based to explain these complex issues. In one of our lessons for What is Depression, we called 2 students up on stage and gave them the relatively simple act of pushing a chair across the stage. It seemed easy until Allison and I sat on one of the chairs as a student was attempting to push it. This activity showed how even though both students were faced with the same task of pushing a chair across the stage, one student had an extra burden, similar to how students facing depression have an extra burden in their lives. We followed the same outline with similar activities for our lessons, What is Anxiety, and Recovery and Resources, to explain the symptoms of anxiety and the importance of strategies in overcoming a mental illness. Our curriculum isn't entirely finished either. Following our lessons, we adjusted the curriculum based on the feedback the students provided. So our curriculum can be updated as students grow and research changes. Even our counselor, Mrs. Rebert, asked for a copy of the curriculum to use as a resource.
After completing all 4 of our lessons, we were delighted with the results. Students were able to identify symptoms and coping mechanisms of both major depressive disorder and severe anxiety disorder. Now, one of our students, Vitali, told us that he was really able to relate with our lessons, not because he himself was suffering from a mental illness, but because one of his favorite rap artists always sang about his depression. This just goes to show the need for mental health education in schools now more than ever. Now, we wanted Educating Empathy's legacy to live on. That is why we received approval from Miss Whitney, the teacher sponsor for the Link Crew at Skyview Academy, to attach our curriculum onto the Link Crew program for the 2018-2019 school year. That way, students will be educated about mental health even after we leave Skyview. We brought our curriculum with us here today, which you're more than welcome to look at. We learned a lot about ourselves throughout this project, and we hope you all learned something too. Thank you so much for listening, and this is Educating Empathy.
Is this work? Okay. So much about leadership is achieving a goal and succeeding, but it's also about struggling and failing, and I'd like to hear what you struggled with and what you did to overcome it.
One of the biggest things that we struggled with actually was getting over our own fear of talking to these students about such a difficult concept. Right at the beginning, pretty much, we all were talking about how are we supposed to answer these questions that we don't know the answer to ourselves. We just weren't really educated on these topics either. So we made sure to talk to the counselor like we mentioned in our speech from North Cherry Creek Counseling Center. She was a big help to us. A lot of research online, talking to the counselors at school. Our mentor was a big help to us. But I think that it was just overcoming that fear of really being able to educate the students on the right information when we didn't know the information ourselves.
Absolutely, and I think that was one of our biggest fears as well, was having a room full of 68th graders and them just staring at you. And actually, our middle school principal, once we told her the idea, she was like, "You can't do that." And so we decided that that was what we really needed to do, so yeah.
So how does this change you and how you view your future?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking at going into education next year, and it wasn't until this project that it really affirmed my desire to go into education. I always knew I wanted to do something with kids, but I had no idea that teaching was where my passion lied. And this project really showed the need for education and the need for stronger education. And that's why I'm going into education next year, and this project really helped me realize that.
When you start the project, you have assumptions, anticipations, what you're going to run into. What obstacles or what challenges did you face that you didn't anticipate?
So when we're at a K-12 school, Skyview Academy, we face a lot of problems with scheduling areas and having which rooms were booked, and there were just lots of teachers fighting over when to have them for assemblies and things like that. So I think one of the main things we learned just leadership-wise too is making sure that we always had to have double, triple, quadruple checked, which was where, even after we had it scheduled on the calendar, there were many issues, I think, with that. But beyond that too, I think one of, like I said, our biggest fears was really working with the 8th graders and not knowing them. That's why we focused primarily in our first lesson on just getting to know their names, building relationships, and learning what they like to do before especially talking about those serious subjects.
Yeah, and another thing, it was actually our first lesson that we did, and we had prepared so much for it. We had run it with some people in our class just to make sure we had everything ready. And we got into the library with all of the kids, and we started doing the activities just to build relationships. And I look at Dawson and I said, well, we don't have the note cards that we need, and then we don't have the pencils that we need. So we had prepared so heavily, but just the material aspect wasn't there. So then, the next lessons after that, we really made sure that we had everything we needed. So it was just kind of a learning process with all of that.
If you had to describe a skill that you learned from this experience in one word, what would that be? And if it's not a skill, maybe a takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd say rewarding.
Communication.
And for me, building relationships with those that are younger than you. So.
And that's
Thank you.
Thank you.